For a week straight, my roommate dreamed of having passionate encounters with a mysterious man. We joked that her destined soulmate was on his way. The next day, she died. That night, I dreamed of a man climbing into my bed. On a weekend morning, Rachel, my roommate, teasingly asked Emma, our other roommate, "You were up to no good again last night, weren't you? I heard you moaning all night long." Emma's face turned bright red, and she lowered her head, stammering, "Well, it was just a dream. I can't control that, you know." Then she looked up and whispered to us, "To be honest, I've been dreaming about this guy for a whole week now." This revelation instantly sparked our gossip-loving souls. "Really? Is he handsome? Do you know him?" we asked eagerly. "He's incredibly hot," Emma replied. 6 feet tall, with a six-pack, and he's amazing in bed. "Ooh." We wiggled our fingers at her teasingly. "This might be your destined soulmate," Rachel said, putting her arm around Emma's shoulders. "Have you thought about trying to find him?" Emma shook her head and pulled away. "Stop it, you guys. I'm not talking about this anymore. I'm leaving." With that, she grabbed her bag and skipped out of the room. There were only 3 of us in our dorm room. Rachel left in the afternoon for a club activity. Bored, I went out on a date with my boyfriend, Jack. On our way, I told Jack about Emma's dreams. His face suddenly changed. "What soulmate? This is an evil spirit coming to claim her life. If she dreams about him for 7 consecutive nights, she'll die for sure." I was startled by his reaction and looked up at him, confused. "But she's already been dreaming about him for 7 nights. His face turned grim, and he sighed. "Then there's no hope for her." I was completely bewildered by his words. Just then, I received a call from Rachel. Her voice was trembling on the other end of the line. "Lily, Emma is dead." I felt a chill run through my entire body. When we arrived at the scene, Emma's body had already been taken away. Rachel stood nearby, covering her mouth, her eyes filled with terror. According to witnesses, Emma seemed to be talking to someone on the street, even though there was no one visibly near her. Then, at a red light, she suddenly ran into the middle of the road like a madwoman. A truck couldn't stop in time and hit her. The scene was horrific. I covered my mouth, tears streaming down my face, unable to believe that my roommate, who had been joking with us just this morning, was now gone. When I turned around, Rachel was looking in my direction, her eyes full of sorrow. I walked over and hugged her, trying to comfort her. She hesitated for a moment before hugging me back. Jack's expression was very strange. He stared intently in my direction, his eyebrows furrowed. After saying goodbye to Jack, Rachel and I returned to our dorm room, feeling lost and dejected. Looking at Emma's empty bed made us feel awful. "Lily," Rachel said, her voice trembling as she stared at the ceiling. "Do you think Emma's death could be related to those dreams she was having?" I shuddered, remembering what Jack had told me. A chill ran down my spine. "Don't think like that," I said, forcing a smile. "It was just an accident." I pulled my curtains closed, but Jack's words kept echoing in my mind. The more I thought about it, the more scared I became. I sent him a message on Snapchat. "Babe, how did you know something would happen to Emma?" "She was haunted by an evil spirit," he replied. The guy in her dreams was a male ghost sucking her life force. When a person's energy is drained to a certain point, they fall under the ghost's influence. My heart skipped a beat. If anyone else had said something so bizarre, I wouldn't have believed it. But Jack's family had a history of dealing with the supernatural, and he knew a lot about ghosts and spirits. Besides, he wouldn't scare me with something like this for no reason. I started to panic. What should I do? Will it come after me next? "Don't worry, that evil spirit was probably only targeting your roommate. It shouldn't bother you." Hearing this, I breathed a sigh of relief and put down my phone. Soon after, I felt drowsy. As I was drifting off to sleep, I suddenly heard the creaking sound of someone climbing the ladder to my bed. I was startled awake. Who would be climbing up to my bed in the middle of the night? I turned my head and saw a naked man smiling as he climbed onto my bed. In that instant, I felt as if my blood had frozen. The man looked very young and extremely handsome, with a perfect six-pack. Then I remembered, this was exactly how Emma had described the man in her dreams. Recalling Emma's terrible fate, my eyes widened in terror. No matter how handsome he was still a deadly evil spirit. I tried desperately to struggle, but I couldn't move a single finger. I suddenly realized I was experiencing sleep paralysis. All I could do was watch helplessly with wide eyes as he slowly began to remove my clothes. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Just as he was about to succeed, my phone suddenly emitted a blinding white light. The man let out a painful scream, jumping off the bed and clutching his hand in agony. He shot me a hateful glance before disappearing into thin air. I felt an immense sense of relief, gasping for air. Everything around me started to blur, and then everything went black. I'm not sure if I fell asleep or passed out. 3. I don't know how much time had passed when I suddenly woke up, sitting bolt upright, my body covered in cold sweat. I touched my body nervously, relieved to find everything intact. Then a burnt smell hit my nostrils. Looking down, I saw that my phone case had been scorched. Inside, there used to be a talisman that Jack had given me, but now it had been reduced to ashes. It seems that the talisman had saved me last night. That evil spirit had indeed come after me. Just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief and go seek Jack's help, I heard a thumping sound coming from right next to me, behind my curtain. I froze, swallowing hard. What could be making that noise by my bed? Slowly, I pulled back the curtain. My blood ran cold at what I saw. A face with bulging eyes and a purple-blue complexion was inches from mine. My head felt like it had been hit with a hammer. I screamed and recoiled. I recognized the face. It was Rachel. I was so terrified that I burst into tears. Rachel had hanged herself from the railing of my bed. She had tied the rope to my bed frame and was dangling in a grotesquely contorted position. My bed wasn't very high. Her toes could almost touch the ground. It seemed impossible for someone to hang themselves at this height. But she was dead, her face blue purple, eyes bulging, tongue protruding. It must have been that evil spirit's doing. I jumped out of bed like a madwoman, wailing and scrambling to call the dorm supervisor. When Mrs. Johnson heard that another student in my room had died, she nearly fainted from shock. But when I brought her to our room, Rachel's body, which had been hanging from my bed, was gone. Mrs. Johnson visibly relaxed, frowning at me. "Young lady, do you think it's funny to play such pranks?" I stared at her in horror, pointing at my bed. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm not lying. I saw her hanging there with my own eyes just now." Mrs. Johnson looked at me sympathetically, thinking I was hallucinating due to the trauma of Emma's death. She sighed and turned to leave. Gathering my courage, I walked over to Rachel's bed and pulled back the curtain. She wasn't there. What I had seen earlier was definitely not a hallucination. Rachel was dead too, and I would be next. Terrified out of my wits, I fled the dorm and arranged to meet Jack somewhere. When Jack saw me, he was shocked. I stood in the sunlight, drenched in cold sweat despite the heat, wrapped up tightly in layers of clothes. Passers-by stared at me as if I were mentally ill. Jack's lips trembled slightly as he slowly approached me. I grabbed his hand like a drowning person clutching at a lifeline. "Babe, please help me," I pleaded. "Rachel is dead too. I'm next." Before I could finish, I froze. Jack wasn't looking at me, but frowning at something behind me. "You bastard, get off her," he shouted. Who are you talking to?" I stammered. Jack's face was filled with anger as he pulled out a talisman from his pocket. "Don't move, darling. That ghost is on your back." I started shaking uncontrollably, making strange choking sounds. I felt as if a pair of icy hands were caressing my body. Jack gritted his teeth, stamped his foot, and suddenly threw the talisman. I thought I heard a faint scream, and it felt like something had been lifted off my body. I threw myself into Jack's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Jack sighed and stroked my body, trying to comfort me. We went to a coffee shop. I stared out the window, looking almost catatonic. Jack lowered his head, deep in thought. After a long silence, I was the first to speak. "Darling, is there any hope for me?" Jack took a sip of coffee, his expression grim. I didn't expect this thing to be so powerful. If it had been a few days ago, I could have dealt with it. But now that it has absorbed the life force of 2 people, I'm no match for it. I panicked instantly. Does that mean I can only wait for death? Jack grasped my hand, his eyes full of tenderness. "Don't worry, I'll definitely save you. Do you still have the amulet I gave you last time?" I paused for a moment, then pulled out a wooden amulet from around my neck. "It's here." He took the amulet and muttered a few words. "Every night before you go to sleep, bite your finger and drop some blood on it," he instructed. "This way, the ghost won't dare to approach you. After some time, when the ghost realizes it can't harm you, it will give up and leave. Then you'll be safe." I nodded vigorously, holding his hand tightly. "Darling, can I stay at your place for a while?" Jack shook his head, his eyes filled with a hint of sadness. "You must stay in the dorm. The girls' dormitory has strong energy, especially after 2 recent deaths. The negative energy there is intense. Only in that environment can the amulet work most effectively." I swallowed hard and nodded in agreement. That night, I returned alone to the empty dorm room, feeling terrified. But for the sake of my life, I followed Jack's instructions. I bit my finger hard and let the blood drip onto the amulet on my chest. At midnight, a gust of cold wind suddenly blew open the door of the dorm room. I shuddered. It was back. I squeezed my eyes shut and remained motionless. I felt a chill on my face as if something was pressed against it. My teeth chattered, and my body was drenched in cold sweat. The entity lingered around me for a while, then seemed to realize it couldn't harm me and left. I felt as if something had been drained from my body. I gasped for air, lacking the strength to even move a finger. An overwhelming fatigue hit me. My mind became foggy, and I slowly lost consciousness. In my hazy state, I heard someone calling my name. The voice sounded familiar. I slowly opened my eyes and saw a face covered in blood and mangled flesh. I nearly fainted on the spot. The face looked as if it had been hastily pieced together, with features misplaced and distorted. A strong smell of blood assaulted my nostrils, nearly making me vomit. "Lily, don't be afraid. It's me, Emma." I huddled in my blanket, trembling. Actually, I had recognized her earlier. She was Emma, who had been crushed by the truck. The male ghost who wanted to take my life was at least somewhat presentable, but Emma's face was utterly horrifying. "Lily, I know I look terrifying now, but don't be afraid. I'm not here to harm you. I'm here to help you. Don't trust your boyfriend. He's trying to hurt you." That male ghost was summoned by him. "Whatever you do, don't trust him, or you'll die." With that, the smell of blood outside my blanket dissipated. I peeked out, but there was no one there. I rubbed my head, my thoughts in chaos. What did Emma mean? Jack was trying to hurt me? But he had saved me so many times. Now, not only was the old ghost still around, but a new one had appeared. I couldn't trust the words of a ghost. If it weren't for Jack repeatedly saving me, I would have fallen victim long ago. Besides, we had been together for a long time, and our relationship had always been good. I had no reason to distrust him, but I couldn't help but wonder why Emma, who had been on good terms with me when she was alive, would try to drive a wedge between Jack and me. I shook my head, trying to stop my wild thoughts. According to Jack, I should be safe during the day. I didn't want to stay in this eerie dorm room for a minute longer than necessary. I only felt a sense of safety when I was with Jack. I ran out of the dorm, intending to meet up with him. As I was passing under an overpass, a female Taoist suddenly grabbed my arm. She was heavily covered, giving off a mysterious aura. Her small eyes darted over me. "Young lady, are you being haunted by an evil spirit?" she asked. I was startled and covered my mouth. How did she know? The Taoist woman looked down and made some calculations, then looked even more shocked. This is a soul-stealing spell. Oh no, you might not live past tomorrow. What did you say? I stumbled back 2 steps in horror. What soul-stealing spell? I'm being haunted by a male ghost. The Taoist shook her head. That's a minor issue, just a demonic seduction. At worst, you'd lose your life. But this soul-stealing spell is several times more vicious. Once the spell is complete, your soul will be scattered to the winds. Young lady, let me ask you, where did you get that thing around your neck? I looked down at the amulet on my neck. This was given to me by my boyfriend. He said it would protect me. She paused, then shook her head. This isn't a protective amulet at all. On the contrary, it's a spirit-attracting charm. Wearing this will draw evil spirits towards you from miles around. If I'm not mistaken, you probably have more than one evil spirit around you now, don't you? I stood there, dumbfounded. She was right. Last night, Emma's ghost had also appeared at my bedside. Young lady, take my advice. Your boyfriend is not a good person. For a moment, I couldn't believe it. Since I had known Jack, our relationship had always been good. I couldn't imagine why he would want to harm me. But this Taoist woman's words were surprisingly consistent with what Emma had said last night, which made me doubt my previously firm belief. I clutched my head in pain. Just as I was about to ask the Taoist how to break the spell, I heard Jack's voice behind me.